And joining us now for a special panel with more on the planned Israeli takeover of Gaza City and the push for a new hostages deal are Lieutenant Colonel Advocate Maurice Hirsch from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs and Colonel Rich Outzen, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you both for joining us today. So, Maurice, let's start with you. What do you make of the cabinet decision to take over Gaza City? Is it enough to achieve the war goals? I mean, it certainly does fall short of a full occupation of Gaza.
So it seems that the decision that's been made is another almost partial decision to move forward and to conquer yet another part of the Gaza Strip that we've been operating in before, that we've held before, and that we've then pulled back from. This is another step in really what needs to be the all-out conquest of the Gaza Strip to ensure that we do actually achieve the goals that the government of Israel set at the start of the war, destroying Hamas militarily, destroying its governance capabilities, and no less importantly, freeing the hostages. For the last 4 months, we haven't seen any movement almost on that subject, and it's something that is now becoming more and more pressing as every day goes by.
And Rich, I want to turn to you now. I mean, what does this actually entail on the ground? You know, the IDF chief is said to oppose the move. Do you think this could potentially harm Israel's security, endanger the hostages, and play into Hamas's hands, sort of becoming entangled in Gaza once again without any clear out?
Right. Well, as a military man, I've seen the difficulties involved with trying to translate political guidance into concrete military plans on the ground. So absolute clarity is necessary. I agree with one Israeli observer of the current decision, which is to say that it is unprecedented in its ambiguity. So this is neither a conquest nor is it something akin to the general's plan that has been touted before in terms of having a zone of exclusion and keeping it free of civilians while you build a new administration. This is very much a halfway measure. And saying that we're going to surround Gaza City, but not conquer the entirety of the Strip, doesn't really bring you any closer to the political conclusion of the campaign. So in that regard, this is a real challenge for the IDF. To be able to execute this sort of threading the needle, I guess you could call it, where you're going to damage Hamas control of the Strip through occupation or at least encirclement of Gaza City, but not the rest of the Strip. We haven't seen anything over the last 20 months or so to indicate that that sort of half measure is really going to work.
So, Maurice, you know, Rich saying this is sort of a half measure, and I do want to ask, you know, why the delay until October? Is this perhaps maybe more of a measure to try and pressure Hamas into reaching a ceasefire deal than it is to actually take over the Gaza Strip?
So I think it's probably a combination of the two. You can't switch from one modus operandi to another with the blink of an eye. To prepare the next onslaught would require really extensive preparation, trying to understand exactly how you would achieve, as Richard said, the very ambiguous goal that's been set so far. And that requires both recruiting more members from the reserves, training them again, preparing all of really the envelope that's required for that type of move, moving the population again southwards, mobilizing all of the different equipments that would be needed, all of the different elements of the army that would need to be and play a part in that type of a movement. So that takes time for planning. It's not something that you can do overnight. And so that, I would assume, is one part of the consideration. Obviously, the second part is to show Hamas that we really do mean business, as it were. Hamas has enjoyed really a tremendous boost over the last few days with the declarations of France and the Brits and the Canadians, and really this growing recognition of the state of Palestine, giving them really the moral boost that they really needed to dig their heels in. Why should they ever come to a hostage deal if they're achieving their political goals, albeit at the expense of more Gazans dying? But they just don't care about the Gazans dying. They're using their deaths to delegitimize Israel around the world. So for them, it's really a win-win-win situation from all points of view. And it's something which Israel also needs to take into account. So maybe that indication that we've really have lost our patience with this idea of another partial deal going forward, maybe that's what will be needed to push Hamas into its final surrender.
And Rich, despite the criticism and the pushback from international actors, the United States seems to be backing Israel here, but at the same time is trying to push forward yet another hostage deal. We know that Hamas has rejected every deal that's been put forward. Do you foresee a scenario where the U.S. will stop Israel from actually moving forward with this plan, or are they sort of, going forward, forging ahead in sync at this time?
Well, the patience of Washington is for Israel's security and for getting the hostages back is significant. I think there's still some slack in the line, so to speak, in that regard. However, what there is not tolerance or patience for is doing this poorly. And I think that there's a couple of different concerns coming out of Washington. The first is, of course, the humanitarian costs. And as Maurice pointed out, that Hamas is willing to fight to maybe not the last drop of Palestinian blood, but they're certainly willing to have a lot of martyrs to get their political goals met. So when Israel does, as I mentioned, half measures or things that don't fundamentally alter the political balance within the Gaza Strip, it really does reward Hamas's whole strategy for that. This was one of the virtues, by the way, of the so-called generals plan, because it would have actually excluded Hamas rule in a fundamental way as a military task from a large portion of the Strip, at least a third. And that starts to really damage the political standing. When you, as a military force, have to fight in, around, and among civilians, not only does that make it much more difficult to break the bond between them and the Hamas overlords, but it also opens up strategic criticisms from Europe. And that is drop by drop becoming a very big political and strategic problem for Israel, this loss of legitimacy, because the idea that it's military force that doesn't actually lead to political change. I think you're going to see more pressure from Washington to conclude this, both because Trump's a deal maker and he wants to see an end to the fighting, but also because this interminable process where the military force grinds on, the hostages are not freed, and the political calculus doesn't change in the Strip looks a lot like strategic incompetence.
All right, so a lot on Israel's plate and a lot of big decisions coming up in terms of the future of the war in Gaza. Thank you both for your analyses today.
Thank you very much.